and now all these heads turn.
And I love that. It's like fighting words.
Most people will live with the undesirable circumstances rather than do the undesirable work.
You know, anyone can make a claim. It's very trendy to call yourself a storyteller, a brand specialist, or a strategist. Thank you for joining us. If this is your first time here, I want to tell you what we're doing. We're doing a 12-part mini-series based on the writing of my guest today, Blair Enns. The book that I'm referring to is called The Without Pitching Manifesto. It's one of the 2 books that Blair's written. It's the 7th proclamation from the book. We will build expertise rapidly. What does that mean? Well, we need to claim our expertise as a rallying cry for perpetual progress. That was a lot for me to say, perpetual progress. And then we work to add to those skills. And it's a continuous learning process. This is mandatory. Let's get right into it. I'm on page 90 right now. I'm going to read a few things and I'm going to open up to Blair to expand on it. And Blair has teased a couple of surprises for us, and I don't know where this conversation is going to go. I'm a little scared. Okay, so just to recap a little bit, right? So first we need to select a focus, and then we need to articulate that focus via a claim of expertise. And finally, we work to quickly add proof to this claim. Because when we make a claim, it's like us planting a flag in the ground and heads turn. The competition takes notice all of a sudden, because prior to that, as a generalist firm, nobody was threatened by us. And you say in here, the generalist, it's an easier life. It's not as lucrative and it's not as fulfilling because nobody attacks an unthreatening generalist. Why don't we turn it over, Blair? Add to that, please.
Yeah, and so this proclamation, the 7th, is really building on the first. We will specialize. And in that proclamation, I laid out 3 steps to positioning. Number 1, choose a focus, which we discussed is a combination of discipline and market. What do you do and for whom do you do it? Number 2, articulate that focus in a claim of expertise. And that's, as you've just alluded to, that's you effectively putting your flag in the ground and claiming territory. I claim this area of expertise for us. And then number 3 is to build the skills, capabilities, and processes that allow you to support that claim. And you might think, well, hold on, shouldn't you build those first and then make the claim? Yeah, you claim you choose a focus, you claim expertise, you put your flag in the ground with that claim, and then now all these heads turn. All of these people who are these we were all kind of brothers and sisters, colleagues, right? Well, like the community. And you can be part of a community and compete at the same time. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But it's like you're the non-threatening, they do good work. They're not really a threat to me. Wait a minute. They just claimed to be experts in something that we do too. And that what we do that your competitor sees as what they do, it might be a declared specialization, or it just might be one of many things that they do, right? So now you're claiming expertise in something. So the competition is a little personally affronted. They don't talk so nicely about you, and they work harder to beat you. That's not a bad thing. We can all still be friends and work and be in this race together, and or not be friends, like whatever. I mean, it's business here. So making the claim, okay, I've positioned my firm. I think somebody in the first night, I don't remember if it was on Twitter or a question, it was like, okay, well, I've made this claim and like the world's not beating a path to my door. Yeah, the claim is just the starting point, right? Now you need to build out the proof. So you could be, if you're a little unsure, if you want to do this backwards, that backwards isn't fair. What I would say is make the claim before you are perfectly comfortable making it. Your positioning, the claim that you make, can be a little bit aspirational, and recognize that the act of making the claim will hurry you up, will sharpen your focus to build the missing skills, capabilities, and processes like nothing else. So go ahead and make that claim to the world of what you want to specialize in. It's okay to be a little bit aspirational. And then once you've made the claim, now you need to work hard to make sure that you separate yourself from the pack.
Now you write something in here that almost sounds like fighting words. And I love it because it's like, are you in or are you out? produce or get off the throne, as they say. Okay? You say in the book here, well, average human beings avoid the difficult decision, and that most people will change their desires, even their values, before they will change their behavior. And the question you have for people, the thing that you must face, people, is, are you most people? And I love that. It's like fighting words. You're like, average people do this. Most people do this. Now you have to ask yourself, are you most people? How have people responded to you saying things like that?
It's been a while since anybody's pushed back on that, but it's a deeply held belief of mine. One of my hobbies is experimenting on my body. So I like to deprive myself of things. I like to experiment with different diets and withhold things, overdose on things. And what I'm struck by, so one of I'm a real amateur kind of nutritionist. I'm really interested in how what we put in our bodies has such an effect on us. And so I experiment on it and I read about it a lot. And I'm always struck by somebody who's got some sort of ailment that they could just fix. They could just fix with sleep, diet's the big one, exercise, whatever it is. But, what is it, 90%? 95% of people won't do it. Most people will live with the undesirable circumstances rather than do the undesirable work. And so that's what's going on here with creatives who aren't able to build a deeper expertise. So number one, the difficult business decision of choosing a focus and then doing the work that's required afterwards to build that deep expertise. Most just won't do it. Now, like I've already said, the good news is I think once you choose a focus, if you have any pride in you, the work actually becomes easy. Because what I've noticed in my career is you choose a focus, and so we've already established I have more confidence than is merited. So I'll put a brave claim out there. It's a little bit, let's say, aspirational. And then, because I have a proud streak, it's like I want to be able to live up to it. I have no problem making the claim, but then I will run like hell to go get what's missing to be able to support that claim. So I think, again, like I've said before, I have this bias. I know what I know about me, and I can make some extrapolation to other people. But I think actually making the claim is the hard part. And then once you make the claim, you go ahead and do the difficult work. But not everybody. Some people just, say, well, specialization doesn't work because I specialized in this area and nothing really changed for me. Well, that is the beginning. And the great news is that competitive pressure to pay off your claim is really powerful. And I remember I had this idea that, okay, I'm going to specialize. I'm going to put this bold claim out there. And then I'm going to run like hell, as the metaphor, to get a lead. And then once I have a lead, I'll be able to coast. But anybody who's ever gotten anything close to some sort of leadership position in the space that they operate in knows that once you're out front, once you sense that you have a bit of a leadership position, now you work twice as hard because you never want to give that up. And similar to that is that, so let's just assume that all that leadership position, the point of view of the marketplace on your stature in the marketplace is directly tied to how good you actually are. That seems to make sense, right? And I've heard, we can't let a night go by without me dropping a David Bakerism. I remember watching David Baker years ago address an audience full of designers, and he said, in the way that only he can, have any of you ever tasted competence? And I thought, wow, that's a bold thing to an audience. And he said, what I mean is, he basically said, you're all generalists, you design a bunch of things, but once you start to focus on the same things, you start to see the patterns, the patterns you start to see the patterns, and then you benefit from repeated application. You get to hone your craft, etc. Now you taste competence. And the challenge with creative people, going back to the first night, the first proclamation, it is in the nature of the creative personality to want to do all things for all people and to leave the field wide open. So at the time he said it was probably 15 years ago, there weren't a lot of highly specialized creative firms out there. There weren't a lot of people in an audience like that who'd ever really tasted that deep competence. And then I've just had so many clients over the years, they articulate it slightly differently than that. But it's like, I remember the first time somebody said to me, I was struck by the length of time. He said, I have run an ad agency for 25 years, and this is the first time in my career I have ever felt like the expert. So you narrow your focus, and then the work that you have to do kind of presents itself. It kind of becomes obvious. Skills, capabilities, processes. You start to codify how you do what you do. You develop some really important standards, and you hold yourself and your team members to those standards. We'll talk about that more in a little bit, I think.
So I want to get right back into the book. Well, you say something in here that, anyone can make a claim, and people often do. They call themselves, it's very trendy to call yourself a storyteller, a brand specialist, or a strategist, or a thought leader, or a social influencer. People say all kinds of things, but now we have to prove our claim. And you say you do that through focus. And there's kind of a thought exercise, not quite an experiment, but you said that two people, all things being equal, of same intellect and abilities, if you gave them a task to do something, and one was to have broad focus and the second to have narrow focus, that you would bet the second person, the one who chose a narrow focus, would build a depth of expertise exponentially greater than the first. That we don't have to be smarter or more creative than our competition, only more focused. This really directly ties into the first proclamation. It seems like we're always referring back to it, because if you fail there, everything else starts to fall apart.
Talk about putting the work in early to get a massive lead. Yeah. I mean, it's not just hard work. Like, I think we were talking about that last night or the night before. But there's a time early on when hard work is really, the value of it is overweighted, right? It's early on in your career, early on in the life of a technology or a platform or some other opportunity in a business space. Hard work's really valuable.
So in the book, you say, okay, look, we want to be a differentiated creative enterprise, and how we're going to do this is through a couple of steps. One is through consulting, second is writing, and third is artistry. But there's a problem with the artistry part, because it's increasingly becoming a commodity, that it is inexpensively acquired now. Can you expand on that, please?
I've worked with many creative firms over 19 years, and every once in a while, one will say to me, the owner of the firm will say, "So, what do you see a lot of firms? What do you think of our creative?" And my answer is almost always the same: it's pretty good. You shouldn't win or lose business because of it. And that's meant to be a somewhat of a disarming comment, because we think it's like you said, Chris, a few nights ago, you came out of art school, you were a high achiever in art school, you had this fantastic portfolio, and you thought the world would beat a path to your door, and it just doesn't happen. And really great work, if people can find it, if it's out there in the world, easily accessible, does get you on the consideration list, but it has to be really good. Right? But once you're on the consideration list, and we talked about this too, I think in the fourth proclamation, we will rethink what it means to sell. Once you're on the consideration list, that really great work doesn't get you hired, because early in the buying cycle, the client overweights the positives or possibilities of change. And late in the buying cycle, they overweight the costs or the consequences of failure. So when prospective clients see great work, your great work, they are inspired by it. And I talk about the importance to inspire the interested, those who are in earlier stages of buying. They try on what it's like to have work as good as the work that you did. They imagine what it would be like to have their brand, video, like whatever it is you do, look like the stuff in your portfolio. So they get excited. They enter into a conversation with you, but by the time they buy, they are no longer overweighting the possibilities of how good things could be. They are now overweighting the likelihood that something is going to go wrong and the costs or consequences of that failure. So great work is a tool of inspiration that works early, and you need to learn to shift in the close from inspiring to reassuring, calming people down and letting them know why things are not going to be horrible. So your work says, look how good things could be. And then closing is about, let's talk about how bad things are not going to be. And in this proclamation in the book, I talk about the importance of codifying your methodology, codifying how you do what you do. Once you choose a focus, you start to build these skills, capabilities, and processes, you will start to formalize a way of doing what you do. And in the first proclamation, we talked about the importance, the secondary differentiator after focus, which is discipline and market, is your perspective or point of view. And once you have a perspective or an ideology on how this discipline for market should be done, then that sets you apart from your competitors who also do the same discipline for market. But it also very easily lends itself to two things. Number one, thought leadership. It becomes easier to produce thought leadership because you have an ideology. So all of the content you produce, or most of it, is framed through some sort of ideology or imbued with this ideology. And a defined way of working. And remember when we had John Gleason up on the stage, ex-procurement guy from Procter & Gamble? He talked about that. He dropped that. I don't know if people caught it as kind of a secondary differentiator, is like, I want to see that you have a codified methodology for how you do what you do. Now, most creative firms that have been around for a few years have a claim of a codified process. It's usually a 4-step process. Each step begins with the same letter. It's usually D. And it's all bullshit. So, but it's a starting point, right? Discover, develop, design. We should have done it differently.
I got to change our copy deck. I left the fourth one as duh.
But once you're focused and once you have a bit of an ideology, then it's easy. You'll actually like fall into this like set way of how you do what you do. And you kind of tried to bring this up earlier, and I think I steered the conversation somewhere else. In that example in the book, I'm actually talking about ditch digging, although I don't think I say it. So
you do say it.
I do say it. Yeah. If I ask you to dig a ditch one time, certain width and length, it'll take you X long and you'll do it to Y quality. But if I ask you to dig 50 ditches, by the time you've dug 50 ditches, you will be faster, you will be better, and you will have developed a way for diagnosing the ground and what tools you should use and what the shape of the ditch should be. And all of this just becomes from repeated observation and repeated application. So once you narrow your focus, you start to find the best way to do this. Then you keep iterating, you keep developing and furthering. And then one day you realize, wow, I have this codified methodology for ditch digging that, people who only dig a ditch once a year, they would never know this. So let's write this out. Better yet, let's draw this out. So when I'm in front of a nervous late-stage prospect where the quality of our work got us there, but now my job is to calm them down, I can roll out this image, this visual graphic, and say, now let me show you how this is going to work so you can rest assured that we're going to get this right. We've done this before. We do it all the time. We have a bulletproof way of doing it. First, we're going to diagnose the ground by using these tools. Then we're going to select the right digging tools. Then we're going to prescribe the shape of the ditch. And if the ground looks like this, it's going to be a curved ditch. And if the ground looks like this, it's going to be right angles. And we're going to use slightly different tools. And then it's going to take us this long to build it, and we could go in these different directions. And just by walking through your codified methodology, the client is reassured, because the inference is little variability in process equals little variability in outcome. If you've done this so many times that you have developed a codified way of doing it, I, the client, can infer from that low likelihood of screwing up. And that is really important late in the buying cycle when you're trying to close. It's not important early on. What's important early on is your ability to get the client to see a beautiful future. And you can do that just through your portfolio, the quality of your work.
So Blair says from the beginning of the book, choose a focus, make a commitment to that focus, and work over time to develop the expertise. So you expose yourself to the same problem over and over again. You're going to notice patterns. You're going to develop efficiencies. And then he says, document that process to create a formula. And when you have a formula, what happens is the client becomes much more confident in you, because what they don't want is a surprise. There are good surprises, but that's not the one they're worried about. They're worried about the bad surprise. And I've said this before. I don't think I've stolen this from you, Blair, but let's see. I've said that clients do not hire the best option. They hire the least risky option. So your job is to reduce risk management, risk mitigation, and you do that by formalizing your process. Now, the whole word formula makes creative people, their skin crawl. I'm not a formula monkey. That's an assembly line mentality. There's something in here on page 96 I have to bring up, because there's a charged word in here that's become a little bit of a debate within the design community. So you say, when we choose to follow the 12 proclamations in this book and we make the transition from order taker, that's the charge word, to the expert, we commit to the idea of perpetual learning and continuous improvement as mandatory. Some people feel like the word order taker is used in a pejorative way, and I guess maybe it is here, that now all of a sudden we're not good enough as craftspeople, or we're not going to ascend towards expertise. Can you expand on this, Blair? I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just asking in case some people are listening. They're like, hey, wait a minute, there's that word order taker again. And I was perfectly comfortable before today doing what it is I'm doing. They're throwing it around, and it's an insult to me and my craft. Why does everybody need to become a thought leader and expert? Why does that matter?
Yeah, I don't know that everybody does need to become a thought leader. And you don't need to be an expert. And if you want to be a generalist designer that designs everything for everybody, that's creatively, that's a rich life. And I see the appeal. And even though I might, for simplicity's sake, I might make the point, I might use strong language that says you shouldn't do that. That's a mistake. It's not a mistake. You just need to understand that every decision you make, there's a trade-off. So back to something that came up the other night. There are two functions in business: making things and selling things. If you're going to focus on the craft, making things, and just be a skilled craftsman, and you want to be broad, and you don't want to be a thought leader, you don't want to be specialized, etc., that's fine. And I hope you can pull it off. You have to be really good and probably get famous. I hope you can pull it off. The trade-off that you make if you choose that path is selling is going to be really, really difficult. Because this is where I'll push back on something John said, but I think it's an issue of semantics. I don't think it's as directly conflicts with what he said as it's going to sound. Relevance isn't enough. Positioning is an act in relevant differentiation, right? So he's saying he thinks differentiation is overvalued. You need to be relevant. You need to be meaningfully different. So if you take the if you build a differentiated firm and then you embrace the other proclamations, like we will be selective, which I think we talked about last night. What does it mean to be selective? It means to only pursue those clients to whom you are most relevant, right? So what was the question? A recurring theme with Blair. What am I talking about?
I don't know. It's fine.
It
sounds good to me. You're saying basically if you are a generalist, you live a rich creative life, and if you're successful, we're really happy for you. But there's many pitfalls to being a generalist that doesn't have the deep focus, that doesn't want to maybe develop some form of expertise so that you eliminate or reduce your competition.
Yeah, the trade-off is sales and marketing becomes difficult. And if you bought a book called The One Without Pitching Manifesto, it's because you have a sales and marketing problem.
And I want to bring it back to this one thing about continuous improvement. And I love that you put this in the book and you talk about it. We must make an investment to train our people, that when we hire somebody new, a new employee comes to work for us, they must feel as though learning never ends and the pace of learning never lessens. We race together, and you as the leader need to set the pace.
Yeah. And just before we went live an hour ago, I tweeted something that I tweet roughly every year. It's a link to what I think is the smartest piece of thought leadership ever written for knowledge-based businesses. So if you tap on my profile, you'll see a link to my Twitter handle there, and it's the most recent tweet. And it's an article written by David Maister, who's retired. He's retired now. He was a Harvard Business School professor, and then he was a management consultant. It's called The Problem of Standards. I read this thing once a year and I think, oh man, this thing is brilliant. It was written in 2001, about halfway down. I forget what the subtitle is called. He talks about this, but he basically says, and I'll paraphrase, there are really only two cultures in your firm, one of two cultures. There's a macro category of tolerance and a macro category of intolerance. In the tolerant category, nobody gets fired in that firm. Nobody is held accountable for the quality of their work, right? And employees, there's no employee turnover. In the intolerant firm culture, everybody understands. So in the tolerant culture, we're all a family, we're all in this together, and there's no judgment here. And Maister talks about this himself. He says the tolerant culture is we're all a family, we're all in this together, we're all doing our best. In an intolerant culture, it's a firm that has said, we are going to strive to be the best we possibly can. We're going to support you to be the best you possibly can be, best you can possibly be. But if you can't keep up, you're out. And Maister does this incredible thing in the room in the moment of that speech. He says, so he describes the two different cultures. And he says, okay, so hands up if your firm represents the tolerant culture, hands up if your firm represents the intolerant culture. He said, it's about 50-50. He said, okay, so you're all business advisors. I see this all the time. I go in, I survey a firm, and I say, do you want to have a tolerant culture or an intolerant culture? About half the people say we should have a tolerant culture, and the other half people say we should have an intolerant culture. He says, you're all business advisors. What would your advice be? And the audience says, the firm should split. He says, yeah, exactly. See how easy it is? Both of these are perfectly acceptable cultures. You can't mix them. So you have to understand in your firm, whether that firm is just you or you and one other person or you and 10 people you're trying to scale it. Do you want to be a place where nobody gets fired, everybody's happy, and everybody's feelings are okay? And this is a gross simplification. Or do you want to be a firm where everybody understands we are trying to carve out a leadership position of the best in the world at something? And that means everybody in this firm has to be capable of growing rapidly. And we will invest in you, we'll support training, we'll throw money at you, all these things. But if you can't keep up, you're out.
I'm going to fire some people on Monday. Team, you hear that? We're an intolerant culture moving forward. I'm trying to carve out a leadership position in the marketplace. If you can't keep up, you're done.
Hey everyone, Ricky here. I'm one of the content directors here at the Futur. Thanks for watching today's video. And if you want to help support us by bringing high quality education to everyone, consider buying one of our courses. There you will find courses to improve your process with clients, manage your projects, and sharpen your design skills. Head to thefutur.com/courses to learn more. Thanks for watching and your continued support, and we will see you guys in the next video.